My name's Monk Rowe for the Phillies Jazz Archive, and I'm very pleased to have on a Friday afternoon Derek Brown with me. And we are not together, but we're going to be together for about an hour. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Monk. I'm glad to be here.
Congratulations on your, was it last year you did a 50-state tour?
Yeah, like a year and a half ago. 50
Okay.
gigs, 50 states. We made it all. 9 months in an RV.
You couldn't think of anything challenging to do, eh?
No, no. And my wife and I, she got to come with, and yeah, we both love to travel. And usually I'm doing gigs by myself, like flying here or there. I've done Europe a lot of times, and a lot of times she doesn't get to come with me. And so we were kind of think of, you know what? I should do more stuff in the U.S. and maybe I should string them all together. And when we started putting feelers out for if something could work, we were getting a really good response from all over the country. And we're like, I wonder if we just go a step further, and why don't we just try to get all the states? Why not?
Nice.
Make it a nice theme, like 50 states, 50 gigs.
Well, this isn't really a musical question, but did you learn anything about America?
Let's see. Yeah, I'm sure I did. I learned it's an extremely beautiful country. Such a variety of landscapes, even people. But we often think of when you want to go on a vacation. Well, some people do. Like you got to go to other countries. You got to go to Europe. But man, we have it all here. People often ask me like what my favorite states were, and I have to kind of go along with the cliche that yes, Hawaii and Alaska were pretty amazing because they're both so exotic. But there was so much beauty. In we were in the fall in the Northeast, so around like the Finger Lakes, and we did the Adirondacks right when it was beautiful colors. And my wife was really good about kind of almost forcing me. I have to say that forcing me to not schedule a gig every day so that we could have like a trip to Acadia National Park or, to see the Grand Canyon. And
Right.
so I'm actually quite grateful for that. So instead of my memories of the great United States just being, oh yeah, I saw a lot of cool concert halls. It's like, no, I saw these amazing forests and these valleys and the oceans, so it was quite an experience all around.
I want to come back to that later on about the role music plays in your everyday life, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you had a incident when you were young as a kid that in retrospect seemed to set you on this path that you're on.
And when you say that, do you mean like professional musician or like the kind of solo saxophone path?
More
That
like,
specific?
okay, just being a musician.
Okay.
Was there something that happened to you way back?
Yeah, well, the ironic thing is when I have fairly musical parents. They've both done choir. My dad was in the University of Michigan Men's Glee Club chorus. My dad's a pastor, and so he was always involved with music at the church and things like that. And I remember growing up and doing a little bit of like the handbell choir and kind of singing. But the ironic thing is when fifth grade came around, which is, of course, the year most schools around the U.S. offer a band program, and it's encouraged to do that, I actually did not want to play an instrument. I just thought I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And I don't. Why would I want to learn an instrument? And my parents forced me to pick an instrument. And I remember when I went to this like band introduction day, and they had all the instruments on a table. As I was like kind of thinking, okay, what instrument am I going to have to play? Which one am I going to pick? And I remember the saxophone was particularly shiny. They let us touch the instruments, all these buttons and valves, like just this machine. But I also remember thinking like, this looks really expensive. So if my parents are going to make me play, they're going to pay for it. I'll play the saxophone. That looks like it's worth the most. I could sell it later on when it doesn't work out. And so it's funny that then, that's now my career. And I think a huge thing because, I do master classes all around the country and the world, and I end up saying a lot of the things over and over. And one of the things I really stress with people is that I don't think I have any natural gifts for music. Some people might argue otherwise, but when when you hear me doing my solo stuff and I'm doing like 4 things at once with the stomping and the rings and the jumping back and forth, which we'll probably talk about a little bit. The only reason I can do that stuff is just because I put in the time, and I'm sure a lot of other musicians would say this. If I have any special ability, it's the ability to sit in a room by myself, for 3 to 5 hours every day and just practice my instrument, just slowly, sometimes painfully slow, practice it. And so when I started playing the saxophone at school, I don't think there's anything special. It's just the big thing was my parents got me into private lessons at first. And we were in a very small town in Michigan. But I just had a private lesson teacher once a week. And because of that, I actually wanted to be prepared for my lessons. It's not a crazy idea. Whereas most of the students the other kids in my band, they were just doing band and, didn't have a big reason to be motivated. And I had a teacher that was, giving me new stuff. I like to please people. That's another talent or bad thing. I don't know.
No, it's not bad.
Okay, cool. But I like to please people so much that I don't want to let them down. And so that naturally just made me want to practice more. And oh wow, they were impressed with my etude last week. I really want to get this one up for next time. Mm-hmm. There's the 2 trains of thought. There's the have you seen the movie Whiplash?
Yes.
Okay, there's that school of thought where it's you beat it out of the kid and it's you stink until you practice and get better. That, oh my gosh, does not work for me. Mm-hmm. What works for me is the complete opposite. Someone saying, that was really good. And then on my own, it's my gosh, the next time, what if they hear me and I'm not as good? They're going to think I'm terrible. So I need to practice even more. And then just doing that year after year, here I am.
What was the first sort of public performance? Was it in church or in school?
I think it was at school, and I remember the first band concert. So it was at the end of that semester when we started, and I had been doing private lessons. I was probably the only one in my school that had done, in my grade, that had done private lessons. And so my director gave me kind of a prime solo spot. We were playing Merrily We Roll Along in unison as a band. But then there was a little mid-break, and there might have been a couple other students that did something special. And I played this version of Amazing Grace with solo piano. And we still had the video footage of that. It sounded terrible. I remember I was squeaking so much. But I remember all my bandmates were so amazed, which is so funny that it's just so far ago. And yeah, it's that wanting to please people. And I'll admit, at times in my life, I have been addicted to the applause and just wow, hey, that felt good. And I hope within that, it's not just the applause, but maybe I can tweak that and say I love, or I'm addicted to seeing the power of music, that the effect it has on people, making people happy. That's the less selfish way to to phrase that.
Well, there's been jazz artists that have not found that motivation. I think that they're playing more for themselves, and so that's another way to think about it. You were born in 83, is that right?
Very good, yeah.
So a couple things were happening then, one of which I'm not sure how relevant it is, but the change to compact discs from LPs. I wonder if LPs had any role in your life, because I was one of those guys who used to read the liner notes to get my jazz history.
Yeah, well, okay, the bad news is it wasn't LPs, but the good news is, because this is still before Spotify and Napster, the CDs, they were smaller, of course, but they often still had booklets, and I loved that stuff. I was just talking with a friend a little bit ago about how every CD we owned, it was just that, top to bottom, every word you read. I mean, it was just kind of something to do while you're listening to it. Also, I was kind of newer to jazz. My parents didn't raise me so much on jazz, so to speak. I would say they raised me on some good music, some oldies. It wouldn't be strange to hear the occasional classical music, or my dad had Brubeck's Time Out, a couple other things. But when I'm kind of new to that, and it's what's this instrumental stuff? There's no words. It's well, I might as well kind of read this stuff here, and then that learning the history, makes you appreciate it a little bit more. So I am grateful for those, for those liner notes and reading that, because I think it builds on each other. Listening to good music makes you want to learn about it. Learning about it makes you want to hear it. And so I think that was a key thing into my kind of foray into jazz.
Was there a first saxophone player that you heard and you wondered, all right, who is that? And then you started looking for that name.
Yeah. Okay. So here is where some people are going to judge me, but whatever. I'm going to let it all out.
Now,
I'm going to let it all out.
You're going to say Boots Randolph, right?
No, I'm going to go even further. I'm going to go. Because I actually wasn't introduced to Boots until much later, but I'm actually going to go all the way smooth jazz, and I'll say, because like we said, I was born in '83. I listened to a lot of pop music growing up, so the big name, if you want to guess, Kenny G.
Kenny G. Yeah.
Yes, him, and then even more. I think my first two saxophone CDs I was given was Kenny G and Dave Koz, so another smooth jazz guy. And I remember, and like I said, I grew up with pop. This was basically pop, so this made sense to me. But it was done by a saxophone. It was done by the instrument that I'm playing, and it sounded really good to me. And I'm really grateful for those first two CDs, because it was that music that got me to kind of, I think, break outside of the box in a way, in the way of like kind of taking it as my own instead of being given music and assignments from my private lesson teacher, which is great. You got to start somewhere, or my band teacher. I'm just doing what they asked me to do. Here, I was given a CD, wasn't asked to do anything with it, and yet I wanted to like, hey, are there transcription books with this? I want to play along with this. And then I remember taking the CD in this little boom box that I had, and I would go out to the garage. And this was in Michigan, and in the winter it would get really cold in the garage, but it didn't matter. I would go into that garage because it had the best acoustics in the house, this nice reverb, and I would put on that Dave Koz, and I had my little transcription book, and I would just close my eyes and play, and it got me also to kind of play out. Like I don't listen so much to smooth jazz these days, but a lot of the tone of these musicians is really nice, and I think a lot of people could learn from the tone of smooth jazz players. Just kind of like really putting air through the horn and making a beautiful sound. And listening to those albums, I would close my eyes and play along, and I'd kind of have the dream of like, man, well, I could do this on a stage one day. This is great. And it was once again, it wasn't an assignment. This was me doing something for the first time on my own with music. It seems small, but I think it was a big step.
Very significant. I did the same thing with Cannonball Adderley.
Ah, yeah.
Talking about filling the horn.
Yeah.
Right? Playing it from this end to that end. And
what a great sound.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
Also in the mid-'80s, the rap music started to become quite popular. And I just wondered if that entered your consciousness, because you're such a percussive guy.
I am, yeah. It's funny. I didn't get into rap when I was younger, mainly because my parents would not have approved. I was very much a goody two-shoes. I talked about wanting to please people. I really wanted to please my parents. It worked for me. I was happy that way, not kind of like stretching the boundaries when I was a kid. Though we did listen to, I would often just say, just all the pop music we listened to, the 80s pop, 90s pop, where there's always a backbeat on 2 and 4. Just such a universal thing. And you listen to my music nowadays, almost always there's a backbeat on 2 and 4. I will never, until I die, I will never get sick of that. I love that. And it's this thing that people say, like they've done studies on this. The music you listen to when you're a teenager, it's going to stay with you your whole life. And so it's like, it doesn't matter how cheesy it seems nowadays. It's nostalgic for me. When I hear that, like Bryan Adams, Tears for Fears, whatever, that heavy reverb on 2 and 4 and those synth, it's so nostalgic to me. It just like warms my heart in a way that, and I'll be honest, in a way that sometimes a lot of jazz maybe doesn't. just because I didn't grow up with that during that time. And I think it has to do with, when you're a teenager, your first kiss, first dance, experiencing all these things. That's the soundtrack of your growing up. And it's like, life is too short to like move beyond that. And I've learned to just embrace it. It's okay. I like this stuff, and it's okay if this enters my playing. Yeah. So that's.
So have you ever been playing one of your solo numbers and the audience gets into it and they start clapping on 1 and 3?
The worst. No. Yeah. Yes, it definitely has happened. Yeah, there are some places maybe that do that more than others.
That's very interesting.
Oh,
It's almost like you could do a sociological study about where that demarcation is.
Totally. Yeah. And it's, yeah. And I mean, I just love that the fact that an audience is clapping to the music means that it's connecting in some way. Yeah. And like you were saying, for me, so much of music, it's connecting with others. It's not just for myself. There is a lot about for myself, of course, but so much is about sharing this. It's a communication. It's a language. I am thinking about the audience. I want to say something, and I want them to be there with me. So,
I don't know if this is part of your thinking, but you have a sound, you have a musical hook, and you even have a descriptive title for what you do. I'm wondering if your career path has been more calculated than some people who just take advantage of serendipitous opportunities. Almost like you were going to start a business and you need a business plan.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think all of that is involved, but definitely I have thought about the business end, and I have preached that to others. I've heard, I forget who it was. It was someone at Berkeley. It was like the music business person there, and they said if you want to make it in today's industry, it's going to be 10% your craft, which is like the practicing and the music, 90% business. And I'm like, what? If I'm practicing like 6 hours a day, that's only 10% of making it? Like, there's not enough time. Okay, and maybe it's not quite, and I wouldn't say I've devoted 9 times as much to the business side, but it is something that I just think today's musicians, gone are the labels that are looking for young talent. We're going to make you a star, and you're going to make it rich when you go to New York City and you get discovered. And look at these huge jazz clubs with thousands of people in them. That's where heck no. If you want to make it, you have to think of yourself as an entrepreneur, unless you maybe have these extremely serendipitous moments. And I think that's still, you have to be kind of lucky also. But yeah, it takes a lot of thinking. I mean, we have these amazing. I often tell people today, this day and age in the music industry, not counting the pandemic that we're in, because we'll get beyond this, but today in the 21st century, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times to be a musician. It's the best of times in the sense that we have this amazing technology. We can record albums in our bedroom, as I did my first 2 albums, with a free program that was pre-installed on my computer, GarageBand. I made my entire album from GarageBand with 2 microphones that cost $100 each. That's unreal compared to 30 years ago. And I think it sounds good, to me it does. So that's amazing. And we have this technology where at the touch of a couple buttons, we can upload our music and videos for free. That's crazy. And it has the chance of being spread around the world. I mean, that's crazy. However, the flip side of that is that, that technology is so easy to use, so inexpensive. Everybody's using that technology. Everybody knows how to use it. Everybody is making an album. It's not a big deal anymore. Plus, with stuff like the internet, YouTube, social media, everybody is posting videos all the time. And a lot of them are really, really good. And so that question, that $1 million question, becomes like, what makes me unique? What is it that I have to say? Why would anyone listen to me over the other 10,000 sax players that are probably better than me? There's always someone practicing more. There's always someone better. And so I've had a lot of these just kind of hard moments where I just have to like listen to myself really honestly. And this is the thing a lot of us musicians are afraid of doing, just artists in general, is like sitting back and do a hard listen and saying like, is this something that I would actually enjoy? Is this something I would seek out? Would I pay money to listen to this? Would I watch this whole video myself? And I think a lot of us are afraid of asking that. I find myself all the time still doing that. And I have to force myself to ask that. And those things, and then also this idea of how do you get noticed? If you have a really good product, so many musicians, so many jazz musicians are famous. Well, not famous, but it's notorious for these amazing best players in the world, and they're playing in some dark, tiny little closet practically in some tiny city or big city, and no one knows who they are. And for a lot of people, that's fine, and that's great. And maybe they have a day job, and that's great. Good for them. That's awesome. But like I said to you, for me, music is a language. It's a communication, and I actually want to think about: is this communicating? Is this getting to people? Doesn't mean I have to dumb it down, but like just putting myself in the audience shoes, and like I said, would I listen to this? Would this grab my attention?
You must have grabbed your attention, your personal attention, when you realized that you had the facility, you had like this super embouchure, right?
Well, I didn't always.
Okay, probably didn't happen overnight, but
definitely not.
You can realize in a practice room somewhere, okay, I can slap tongue. Now, what's the next step? And you start adding these things on, and I'm trying to think of what my question is, but you're talking about, would I listen to that? And so when was the first time you tried that by yourself in front of an audience? Doing those things?
Yeah. Well, a cool thing is that I was able to do it online first, in the sense of posting a YouTube video. Yes, I'd experimented a little bit before. I was teaching down in Texas, Abilene Christian University. I was a full-time instructor for 6 years. And that time was really good for me because I did undergrad, Hope College, graduate school, University of Cincinnati. And when you're a student, you're learning so much. But there's also kind of this underwritten kind of competition. There's this intensity of kind of always comparing yourself. And that, I didn't do so well with that. Like, I think it was good for my growth and getting me to practice because, wow, they practice a lot. That's what I'm going to do. But I almost kind of burnt out at that point. And that was when I didn't know what I had to say. I didn't know what kind of music I wanted to play. I was studying kind of more or less traditional jazz. But then it took me moving down to Texas and being a professor, and I had income coming in. I had free time on my hands, and it was like, oh yeah, I have this saxophone here. Am I going to practice? I should practice this. What do I want? And there was this freedom to like, if I'm going to play this thing, I'm just going to play it exactly how I want to play. I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to do the things that I think that other people want me to do, the things that a good jazz musician is supposed to do. Yeah, sometimes I would do that stuff because I wanted to be good at improvising. But it was like, that slap tonguing thing that I remember people hearing, I want to really figure that out. That's really cool to me. And so I don't care if I take 3 hours just straight up working on slap tongue each day. I'm going to do it because I can. And I know not everyone has that luxury. And I'm even grateful if I had moved like to New York City right after grad school and into that scene, I don't think I ever would have kind of come across this solo type of playing, because I would have just been hustling, trying to get into every gig, every group I could do. I'd be doing, wedding bands, bar mitzvahs, all, and that's good stuff. And some people, and I don't want to knock that stuff, because some people do that stuff, they love it, they thrive with it, and they still have time on their own to do that. But for me, it was really good just kind of taking a little bit slower after I had already worked on these skills of improvising and good tone in college. And now, what do I want to do? If I'm really honest, what do I want to work on? Because I don't have to play this music. And that was kind of freeing for me. I don't have to play it. And so if I'm going to play it, I'm going to play it how I want to. And just slowly I realized I like this percussive stuff. And some of the people I was listening to, like the Eddie Harris's, the jumping around to the octaves. And then the big one for me, Bobby McFerrin. Of course, not a sax player, a vocalist, but hearing him perform and just one guy, no electronics, no looping, one guy on a stage, and just some of the most amazing stuff you've ever heard and the most creative stuff, and just being like, I want to be able to do that, but on the saxophone. And so then slowly over the years, progressing and adding this, what if I could get I have this pop sound. I wonder if I could kind of get a hi-hat sound. And then also thinking of other instruments I'd explored. I'd played drum set a little bit and thinking, okay, so where's my bass drum sound? Where's my snare? Okay, could I do like a roll sound? And then, okay, I have a bass. Can I do the And all of it slowly came together. Soon enough, it was like, I have a song here. I'll post this online. Let's see what happens. And this video that I posted maybe, I don't know if it was like 7 years ago, I called it Catch 'Em Up is the name of this composition that I wrote. And yes, by then I had kind of thought of a name, beatbox sax.
Yeah.
Just thinking like, it kind of sounds like beatboxing, I guess, even though I don't actually I'd never practiced vocally beatboxing. And that video did really well, surprisingly well. Like it got up to like 100,000 views in a couple weeks. And I was just like, what? Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. I was a little, once again, kind of like a little addicted to the applause, so to speak. And then it's funny because then right from then it was like, I need to do more, and I'll do a cover song of a pop tune. And I remember even getting into the whole game here, and this is what you have to be careful with these days as a musician, is thinking, okay, my first video got this number of views. This next video is going to be even better. It's going to be a cover song. How can I do the angle? What's going to be the best way to get more people? Okay, Every Breath You Take by the Police. Here we go. I put it out. It does like half as well. And I am depressed. It still got 50,000 views, which is, a month ago, I would have been amazed, but it didn't matter. So much in life is comparative. We're just comparing. And it's just like, only 50,000. And then I was depressed. And from that point on, I learned it's not about the numbers. Yes, I want my music to communicate. I want to reach people. But I'm not going to obsess over everything of like, what's going to get the best look? What's going to get the most views, It's got to be fun for me first and foremost. Yeah. And then it's icing on the cake if it connects with, more than icing on the cake, but it's just that's the sweet spot. If it's something I truly love and it's resonating with people, that is the sweet spot. That's what I want to be doing.
All right. Well, speaking of sweet spot, your description of developing your thing reminded me of a quote. I was able to interview Harry Sweets Edison, the trumpet player from the Basie era, and he was talking about when he was a young man, this would have been the late 1930s. He said this about the already established musicians like Louis Armstrong and Coleman Hawkins. And what he said was, everybody had a sound of their own, a sound that could be recognized. That was our ambition in my day, to not be an imitator, but an originator. We would rather be the world's worst originator than the world's greatest imitator.
Yeah.
So
I can resonate with that.
Yeah, I was thinking about your sound, and then the incredible breadth of saxophone sounds that have happened since the 20s. Mm-hmm. And so you're in a current lineage of what's going on now, because sometimes I wonder, how does it get harder to come up with your own sound? I mean, how do you go beyond John Coltrane's harmonic innovations? And so if I can't do that, what can I do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had kind of a musical midlife crisis in grad school, that period where I was working really hard, but kind of like burning out at the same time. And it came from, I specifically remember the moment. I was second year grad school student. I was a grad assistant, so I was supposed to be one of the top people. I was getting paid to be in school. I was in charge of a quote-unquote beginning jazz combo with some freshmen in it. And in came this punk saxophone kid who played circles around me. He was twice as good as me. I was 5 years his age older. He was twice as good, and it just drove me nuts. I'm sure other musicians can relate to this.
Oh, yeah.
It's impossible not to compare ourselves, as sad as that is. But it drove me nuts, and I remember thinking, like, I'm twice his age. Why? Surely I've practiced more than him. Does he just have something in him that's gonna? And it made me think, if I'm not the best one in this room, I'm not the best one at all in Cincinnati. I'm definitely far from the best. How am I going to make a name for myself out there? How am I going to get noticed? And thinking about all the internet things and what is it that why would anyone listen to me when there are people twice as good as me? And I've worked so hard for this. That is so hard. Now, I wish I could say that then something switched and is like, oh, I'll do beatbox sax and I'll do solo concerts and I'll do all these extended. No, of course, it never works that cleanly, and you go through some really dark, hard times. But that was right around the time that I got that teaching gig in Texas. And so I had that time to just realize, you know what? I'm going to stop just completely only trying to imitate people, because I wanted to be the next Sonny Rollins. He was my guy at that time. And just when I realized there's 10,000 other sax players that want to be exactly like Sonny Rollins. And then the crazy thing is, none of us will ever be exactly Sonny Rollins, because, you know, he had his way of playing and he had his own life, you know, influences. We'll never be that same way. And so it was just like, once again, if I'm going to play this instrument, it's going to be exactly how I want to play it. I wasn't even at that point, I don't think, dreaming so much about a performing career. I think I was probably thinking it wasn't going to happen when I got that teaching job. Not saying that it was like I was giving up or anything, because that was a great, great gig. But it did allow me to kind of relax, like I said, and just pursue what I wanted to pursue. I don't think I would have said at that time, I'm seeking my own unique sound. It was just truly seeking what I like. And that's another thing with that whole honestly listening to yourself. I think more musicians, or a lot of musicians, need to be honest about what they truly like in music. It's kind of like when I was a teacher and I was teaching some of these saxophone majors. They were a major in music. They wanted to perform for a living. And like, let's say it was a classical student. And then I'd say, hey, have you listened to this piece? What recordings do you like? And they're like, no. And have you listened to any classical saxophone? And it's like, they don't listen to classical saxophone at all. Like almost never. And it's like, you're pursuing this full time. Like, this is going to be your thing. You want it to be your thing. And you don't even really like the music? You know, that seems strange. And that's an extreme example. You know, there are other people, I think, who are they're imitating someone because that's who they think they're supposed to like. Or in the typical jazz hierarchy or the evolution of jazz, you're supposed to start, you know, like if we just look at Coltrane, you start with Blue Train, but then you move on. That's too simple now. You move on to Giant Steps, really fast harmonic language. You move on to A Love Supreme, where he opens it all up, and then you move on, and you kind of don't look back, and you kind of, you know, it's like that's a lesser form of music. And for some people, that's great. You know, if avant-garde jazz is your thing, and that's what gets you up in the morning, go for it. That's awesome. We need people in this world that are excited about what they're doing. But if you're doing that just because that's what the other kids, you know, the other sax players are doing, your heart's not going to be in it, and I don't think you're going to have what it takes to push through the highs and a lot of lows of a music career. You have to absolutely love and be obsessed with the music you're pursuing, and that was kind of what I was getting closer to when I was coming across the music of Bobby McFerrin and Eddie Harris, and that kind of idea.
Well, you just said that was very informative, and you said a word that I was going to get to. Do you think you're obsessed with your music career? Because I know that how my mind thinks, if I'm working on an arrangement or something, and I take the dog for a walk, I'm like working on this thing in my head, and I forget that I'm outside to do. Like I'm just standing on the sidewalk, and the dog's looking at me like, yeah. And I wonder if you are constantly trying to think what's next for me.
I mean, I definitely am. Yeah, because I have two little ones, as we talked about, both under age 2. And just the other day, yeah, walking him in his stroller, and I was thinking, what's another kind of song, a different approach I could do to a live gig? And oh wow, we're already at the park, you know. So I know that happens. I think I have worked on the skill, and I think you have to learn it, of also trying to be present in the rest of the world, like in my marriage and with my family. But I've learned it the hard way, in the sense of like having a lot of stressful moments where I literally call my dad and say, Dad, I need your help. I don't know what to do. It's just, and then my dad saying, hey, maybe you need a day off. I mean, I had this conversation literally 6 months ago. This pandemic is bringing out a lot of issues, I think, for us musicians, and it's a lot of good stuff we need to deal with, if we deal with it. And it was, maybe you need a day off. Have you ever taken a complete day off from the saxophone? And it's like, no, that's like the number one thing I preach is practice every day. And yes, there's different types of people. Some people need to hear that. Some people actually need to hear like too much, like go see a movie. You know, some people need to hear different things. And I was that person. I needed to be told, hey, you're only going to get this moment once when your kids are this little. This pandemic thing, there's a silver lining here. This could be a blessing. And don't overdo it. You're never gonna, you know, it's those cliche things we've heard. And on your deathbed, you're not going to say, I wish I had just practiced a little bit more, you know, or I wish I had worked a little. You're not going to have that. It's, I wish I was with my family more. And so that has been a hard thing, but ultimately good, that I've had to learn. Like a day off, it's important. Maybe it's not the best thing ever for my music, but I think it's the best thing for me as a person. And I hope that the best thing for me as a person also is maybe, in a way, the best thing for my music. I just finished a biography of Leonardo da Vinci. And it talked about how a lot of his biographers kind of lamented the fact that, you know, he was notorious for putting things off, not finishing projects, working so much on like theatrical stuff that we don't even have any records of what he did. He studied anatomy that didn't even have to do with his art, like into how the brain is shaped and some biographers were like lamenting the fact, like, it's too bad that he didn't finish more, or that he didn't put that energy, instead of opening up all these bodies, why didn't he put that energy into like doing more paintings? But then this biographer was really good at saying, like, no, it made him who he is. It satisfied his curiosity. If he wasn't doing those things, he probably wouldn't have been so curious to do these amazing things. And who could fault Leonardo da Vinci for anything, you know, for not doing enough? But yeah, it's one of these things where, like, I hope that the better person that I become, it translates itself some way into my music. Similarly to, just if we want to just look in the idea of music, when I practice like drum set, I think that's going to make me actually a better sax player. Or when I practice the guitar and think about that, it's going to make me a better sax player. And I can speak from experience. There are so many direct relations where, wow, that idea went completely from drum set to saxophone. I think like a drummer in that sense. Or the visualness of the keyboard. It definitely made me who I am and helped me kind of find my voice. Just experiment with all these things.
Did you ever experience playing in combos where you found it dissatisfying? Did that have anything to do with you choosing to be mostly a solo artist?
Yeah, which it's funny. I'm kind of coming around to the other side where my last 2 albums have now, the last one I just had was February 26th with Jeff Coffin, a duo, and it's just the 2 of us playing saxophone. And then the one before that, I wrote a big band album, and it's kind of my sound. It's called All Figured Out, and it's with a complete big band. I wrote all the parts. It was just, and it's called All Figured Out as an ironic way of like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but this is fun for me. And now I'm realizing, oh, hey, it's kind of fun playing with other musicians, especially in this pandemic where like you literally can't. It's like, man, I miss that. But yeah, you know, when I was talking with Jeff Coffin, we've been talking a lot since the album, and we were both saying how frustrated we get sometimes with other people, and we always feel like we have to kind of take it all on our shoulders. I mentioned being kind of the goody two shoes of school, but also I was that like teacher's pet or the one who like I hated group work, group assignments in school where it was, okay, you five, you're going to do this play and you have to write some line. And it always ended up just being me doing everything because I like wasn't satisfied with like, you guys aren't doing anything, I'll just do it myself. And then, that could apply, I think, to some music things, or you have band rehearsals and like everybody in Chicago, everybody was late. It was like just normal to be 30 minutes to an hour late. And it's like, come on, this is like wasting my time. It took me an hour to get here. And also just not only the sense of like wanting to play by myself, but also like kind of organizing everything myself. We talked about the music business side, the entrepreneurial thing. And, there were times where I was hoping, okay, because I have these videos. Now I have a couple of endorsements with some saxophone products like Leggeries and people. Okay, things are going to start to come my way. They never come my way. And I remember one moment where I had just kind of gotten connected with this company and it was like, they were saying some things they were going to do, some connections they had. None of that came through. And so I remember just being like, okay, screw it. I'm going to do this all myself. I'm going to find a list of every jazz festival. And I came across a really great website that had everyone in Europe listed. It was like 1,200 websites of different festivals. And I was like, I'm going to send an email to every single one. And at the same time, I'm listening to like music business podcasts about like how to write an email, how to have your webpage, how to do follow-ups. And so it's like, I can't just do one email. I got to send follow-ups. Okay, every 2 weeks, I'm going to send another email. I would send up to 5 emails to each of these places. And I'll tell people, like, that first year, I got, like, probably, like, 6 gigs in Europe. 6 gigs, one way I could look at it is 6 gigs out of, like, 6,000 emails. That's pretty bad. It's pretty low return rate. But compared to what I was doing the year before, that was 6 gigs at jazz festivals, international jazz festivals in Europe. That's amazing. And people don't have to know how many emails I sent, how I did it. But man, I sure put it on my website and hey, international musician.
Nice.
And then the next, and then hopefully, yes, I can't send 6,000 emails every year, but hopefully it does get a little bit easier, and it has as your name gets out there. But you have to keep doing the work. And this industry, it has a very short attention span. It seems even shorter now with social media, where it's just like you got to be putting stuff out all the time. But just a month ago, I did another email round completely by myself. My dad helped a little bit, but I sent another 1,000 emails or 2. And this is thinking, I don't even know if festivals are like planning stuff. I don't know if universities are opening, but I gotta get stuff out there. I was feeling the urge to make stuff happen.
Some things never change. I recall when we started this project 25 years ago that I would be interviewing people like Clark Terry of that level, and I would be surprised afterwards that some of them would hit me up for a gig.
Yeah.
And the reason it surprised me is I just thought, being a fan of these guys, that they, by this point in their career, they had it made.
Yeah.
Right? They just
Not
wait
in-
for the
not in
phone
this
to ring.
genre.
I guess not. It never changes.
No.
I listened to the big band thing on your website, A Simple
Cool.
Gesture.
Oh, cool.
Beautiful. And there's a part in the middle, about 3/4 of the way through. I think it's like a B-flat sus vamp type thing. And you're blowing over it. And I'm wondering, beyond the percussive effects and the melodic lines you're playing, what's going through your head? Are you do you have music theory in your head? Do you have modes and scales and
Yeah. So I definitely studied all that. And when I was teaching in Texas, I was also, in addition to being the jazz and saxophone guy, I was also the second year music theory guy. So all that stuff is floating around there, the diminished chords, the augmented 6 chords. However, a lot of that doesn't necessarily find its way into my music. I do think I am pretty visual as lame as that sounds, when it is an aural sound, I do think of kind of chord shapes, arpeggios. And I also think of the numbers a lot, which it sounds lame when I'm talking about it like this. But let's just say that's how I practice a lot of times. I practice a lot of patterns. I do a lot with modes. I'm definitely not the one to be pushing the harmonic boundary. Definitely if I have something new to offer the saxophone world, if you want to call it new, and of course everything's borrowed, it's of course, the percussive, the rhythmic elements, the putting together of the bass lines and the melodies at the same time, and the percussion. But if you listen to my solo stuff or my big band stuff, you listen to the chords, it's pretty simple stuff. And that's the way I like it. I have tried to break out of that and I'm going to write something really compressed, complex, something my fellow faculty members would like. And I can never finish it. It just doesn't feel like me. I can't, it's just I got to have that backbeat. It just feels so good. And so, in my playing, it's very tonal. I'll sometimes do a little inside outside. I'm a huge fan of dissonance resolving to consonance. Yes, I mostly do consonants, but I'm not against dissonance at all. Hey, I love movies, and what is a movie without dissonance? And sometimes the deeper the dissonance, the better the resolution. I need to preach to myself right now, because I could go further with that and take the audience to more dark places to then resolve. But I do have to say, I'm not a huge fan of music that just never resolves. Yeah. Sometimes it's okay. Life doesn't always resolve, and that's okay. But when I listen to music, I want to hear that, but then I need that release. And another thing in my music, I just need something to hold on to. Yes, I can get lost sometimes, but man, if there's some percussive element or some repetition, I eat that stuff up. And that's one thing I wish some more, not all, but I wish some more jazz musicians would embrace repetition, wouldn't be so afraid of repetition. I think of a jazz drummer who's always or always, the beat is always somewhere different, and it's constantly changing up. When sometimes that feels so good, and you can see it at a jazz club where you got the musician, and people might be into it, but as soon as the drummer start going, even if it doesn't belong, everybody starts bobbing their heads, and it's just and then they move on 4 seconds later. And that's fine, but I love repetition. I think there's probably something naturally human. We could probably look at the words are escaping me, but in religions, when there's spiritual experiences, I'm blanking on the phrase, but the repetition,
the longevity.
Yeah. And
I'm so glad you said that, because I felt the same way. I felt so out of it. Some of the current music I hear, it's not only the drummer who's playing everything but the time, but it's the bass player too, right?
Or the comping.
Or the comping, and I feel I can't even tell what time signature this thing is in.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm sure you guys are good, but I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah. And like I said, sometimes that can be cool if you're thinking of taking the audience on a journey. We're going to go to an unknown place, mystery. But then, okay, here's a little bit of home, back on the trail. I think a lot of humans, we just need that. Yeah. And another thing is, I don't want to tell musicians, how to change their music, or say, you need to, make it simpler for the audience. No, it all comes back to being honest with yourself and the music you listen to. If you only listen to music where it's super confusing, you can't tell where one is or the tonality, that's great. And it would make sense that you would like to play that stuff. But if you don't listen to that, it's just being real to ourselves. And then I do have to say, I feel grateful that the music that I like to make has reached somewhat of an audience. Of course, we always wish it was more, and we can always compare it to more. But I'm very grateful, because like we said, there are some people that truly like to make this music that's so esoteric, more power to them if they have the energy to do that. But I am grateful, and that's where a little bit of luck comes in, that the music that I actually like to make actually has connected with some people, and so I'm very grateful for that.
Cool. Well, I see a tenor behind you.
There it is. It's
And,
always behind me.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go.
Did you have to fuss with your gear so that your gear helped you get where you wanted to go with the way you play?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I love saying that, like, man, it's it's the player that makes the music. It's not getting the right gear that's going to make you sound better. That is so true. And I could do this beatbox sax stuff on any horn.
Okay.
But there are certain things that maybe, this mouthpiece, this Jody Jazz mouthpiece, is a little easier, or I like the feeling of the new mechanics. There are some small things, like the fact that this would get really technical. I won't go all the way there, but when you slap tongue on the sax, my tongue is making a suction on the reed, and it's pulling down the reed and releasing, and you're hearing the sound of the reed slap against the tip of the mouthpiece. You can also go and get that kind of snare sound. But that's the sound of the reed slapping against the mouthpiece. And most typical jazz mouthpieces they have a big tip opening. And so when you do that, it's just much more tiring to do that. Plus, to get that sound, you have to bite down on the reed it's kind of like a slingshot. You have to put pressure against it, and so when you release it, it slaps. If you do that with a really open mouthpiece, the pitch is going to go way up. And so a lot of my earlier career, I was fighting with out-of-tuneness, where my slap tongue notes were really sharp and tiring. And so over the years, I've been trying to find kind of the perfect mouthpiece where it's a smaller tip opening, but still gives me that power I need. And actually, Jody Espina of Jody Jazz made me a specific mouthpiece. They call it the DV Beatbox. Even though, like, it makes it sound like, ooh, if I get this, I'll be able to beatbox on the saxophone like Derek. It's just a normal mouthpiece. It has a smaller tip opening, but it works. It's just good for me.
So if you had 5 minutes before going to, babysit your kids, and you pick
Which I'll
up
be
your
doing
horn,
right after this interview.
I assume so. I've been there.
Yep.
And by the way, they're going to be saying this particular sentence fairly soon, and that is, Dad, do you have a gig tonight?
I can imagine. So I'm enjoying that they don't have to say that all the time.
Right,
But yeah, yep. And they'll say it with such sadness when it's like, wait, this is exciting, right? No, yeah.
What would you choose to play if you had a few minutes? I mean, can you give us would you think of a key and a tempo or a groove?
Yeah, well, it depends on what you want. So, do you want me to kind of explain the process of how I put this together, or you want me to improvise? You want me to play a tune?
Yeah, maybe just a little improvising, and then afterwards you can talk about how come I did that.
Yeah, okay. I will play, because I've started doing this more and more, just straight up, just improv, solo saxophone. So yeah, like a lot of times I do think of a key. So like I'll think kind of D minor here, and we'll see if it stays there. Let's see. It's always weird playing sitting down, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. I'm realizing I could just keep going and going, but thank you.
I loved it. And
Thank you.
I was thinking about the fact that you do sit at the drum set and play. You know, because I could hear the bass drum going, and
I'm stomping. I don't know if it's coming through, but I have a box here that I'm stomping. And that was realizing drummers use all of their appendages. Why can't I use my feet? Guitarists sometimes hit their instrument, in certain styles. Why can't I put a ring on my thumb and hit my saxophone on the? I'm hitting on the thumb hook there. It's the one finger, my right hand thumb, that's not playing a note. But yeah, and a lot of what you're hearing in there is the biggest realization for me was realizing that I could kind of, in a way, get both a melody or harmony and a bass line. At the same time, adding this percussive stuff, sometimes with the mouth, sometimes with the hand. And that was a huge thing was Bobby McFerrin. Where I realized when he's doing his solo stuff, he's got like this kind of percussive thing going on his chest, but he'll alternate between this low, deep voice and then this high falsetto voice, and you have to be really accurate and really confident. And he's got this and it makes it sound like when you step back, you could realize, okay, technically nothing is happening at the same time, but it's happening so quickly and so fluidly that it kind of sounds like there's two singers. There's a high soprano and a low bass. And so that just got me to practice, kind of coming up with my own exercises of getting like independence between higher register and lower register. So like playing, like a repeated note in the bass and a scale up top. So like, or reversing it. Repeated note up on top, scale on the bottom. And then where it gets tricky is now maybe I could do like a 2-note ostinato in the bottom while doing a scale on the top.
Oh.
Or whatever. Start to improvise or do the reverse of that. And now I'm working on, because I want to be even better at improvising at this. And I'm even trying to do more like kind of traditional like swing stuff. And so I'm trying to think like, oh, what would a bass player do? Like a walking bass line. Maybe I'll separate it, but can I do like a scale? Let's see. So trying to do kind of a little stepwise in the bass.
Yeah.
But you could see over here, I have like these exercises on, you can't see it right here.
Okay.
And I just have them numbered. Bass, down 3, up 3. Number 2, bass, up 3. Number 3, bass 4. 1 through 10 of different bass lines. And on the right, A through H, different melodic stuff that I could do. And now I'm just piece by piece going through each one. It's painfully slow. Not fun to listen to day after day, but, like I said, I think I'm a slow learner, but all that matters is I just do it. You just get to it.
It helps, I think, that you seem to be rather an extrovert.
I have fooled you.
Well,
I am a performer for sure. Maybe more of an actor. Okay, when I am one-on-one or with my family, yes, you'd say Derek is definitely an extrovert. When I'm in front of audiences, Derek, wow, you're so lively, so much energy. A lot of people say the word energy when I'm on stage.
Yeah. Okay.
But that is a thought out thing. That did not come natural to me. I think I'm definitely more of an introvert. I would prefer when the gig is done to just go to the hotel and read a book by myself, and I can just, whoo. And you should see me backstage before a gig. Like I get nervous every single time I play, every single time. And one of the ways I trick myself is I try to kind of like rephrase it. Instead of thinking nervousness, I think excitement. Take those butterflies, and instead of calling that nervousness, call that excitement. And then when I go out on stage, when they introduce my name, I almost always run out and it's just my way of being like, I'm from the beginning. Oh, Derek is excited to be here, and it's me tricking myself. I'm excited to be here. Hey, everybody. And so, and that did not come natural. I had to, when I would do concerts early on, I would write everything down and memorize it, and just like anything else, I had to learn it. And there's no shame in that, of course. It doesn't matter. If you came naturally or you learned it, you still have it, And so
Awesome.
that's where I am.
That's great. Well, we've talked for almost an hour, and this has been really very informative.
Thanks.
I want to know if you've ever had this circumstance. You do a clinic at a school, and you show them your thing, and a week later you get an email from the band director saying something like, "Thanks, Derek. All my saxophone players are slap-tonguing during the Elgar variations."
Yes, I knew you were going there, and I love that I have the most direct example of that. I should pull it up on my phone, but it was a couple years ago, and it's happened a few times, but it was at specifically a middle school, and I worked with the saxophonists, and I showed them all how to do a basic slap tongue. Some of this stuff is really hard to do, and so you can't just learn how to double tongue easily. You can't even learn how to slap. It took me 9 months to slap tongue, but I have some other percussive sounds I taught them. And I remember getting an email the next day. He enjoyed the clinic, and I could tell people enjoyed it. The next day, I got a text, and it was a video of a student, and he was just going pop 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 pop, and it just said, it had a word that said thanks, period. but then the kicker, here's the best thing. But then a minute later, he sent another text, and it said, but you know what? He actually took his horn home and worked on this. And then the next day, he sent a video of a tune that the guy wrote using it, where he was kind of doing a note, and then he did a pop, and then a different note. It was really basic. But he said he wrote a tune. He's never written anything. And I was like, yeah, that's what I like to see. That just to excite people. I'm not expecting or wanting other people necessarily to copy me, but if I can do something that inspires some young people in some way, I know it's going to annoy some people. I know there's going to be a time, it already has kind of happened, where I see on social media other people kind of doing way too much poppy stuff, or it's not quite there, and it's just like, oh boy, people are going to hate me for kind of like encouraging this. But if it gets people to find new enjoyment out of their instruments where maybe it wasn't, and like I said, not everyone has to do this. No one has to do it. But if it does, that makes it worth it for me. Just to inspire people to think differently. You don't have to play a certain, there are different things you can do, and yeah.
Well, on that note, I really enjoyed talking to you. And
likewise.
I'm gonna let you get back to your everyday life.
Yes, that needs to happen.
Yes, indeed. So thanks a lot, Derek.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Monk, and thanks for doing what you're doing. This is awesome. All the interviews. I was able to check some out. Inspiring stuff, and really important to hear from all these generations of musicians.
It's, as I said, it's been a dream gig for me.
That's awesome. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.